To Live. That is the English translation of the title of Akira Kurosawa's 1952 masterpiece, Ikiru. It's a profound, beautiful film about a small-time bureaucrat who learns that he is dying and races to find meaning in his final days. Akira is one of the greatest cinematic achievements of the 20th century, and I, like many of you, have felt a deep personal connection. A connection so deep, in fact, that it almost derailed my academic career. Back in the early 1990s, when I was a student at Central Michigan University, the legendary Japanese author Haruki Murakami visited campus. Through a strange confluence of luck and connections, I was invited to a casual dinner with him. I knew that he, like myself, was a huge and devoted fan of the film Ikiru, and I saw this as my moment to transcend the typical fanboy handshake, and I decided I would impress him by delivering a simple declaration of shared fandom in his native Japanese. And I spent an entire week practicing this one phrase and learning it phonetically. Your favorite film, Ikiru, is also one of my favorite movies. But when I finally stood up and had the nerves to say it, my utter failure to grasp proper phonetic reading took over, and the line that I actually delivered was, "Your wife has very nice breasts for a woman her age."
That's disgusting!
Needless to say, I was swiftly and understandably excused from the interview. I don't even know if he was married. But that story, that monumental, cringe-inducing clash between profound artistic intent and spectacular linguistic failure, perfectly encapsulates the theme of today's episode: the power of cinema to connect us, and the massive cultural barriers that can stand in the way. I'm Eric Trommater.
I'm Erin Brown.
I'm Audra Angelique.
I'm Jennifer Trujillo.
And I'm Luke Higginson, and this is World Cinema History.
And today, great friend of the podcast, Luke Higginson, is here to help Erin Brown, Audra Angelique, Jennifer Trujillo, and me in unpacking the endearing legacy of Ikiru and the fragile art of global cinematic translation. Luke Higginson, writer, director, editor of Relax, I'm from the Future. This was your choice this week. Tell us what drew you to Akira Kurosawa in the first place, and Ikiru in particular.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me come on and talk Kurosawa. It's very exciting for me. Kurosawa is probably my go-to answer for my favorite filmmaker. He's one of those guys that you get into early when you start getting into movies. And then I went to film school and sort of saw more of his movies and got more into him. And then as you sort of learn more filmmakers, you sort of maybe fall away from him for a little while and sort of discover new stuff. But then I really came back to his films during the pandemic, and I really remembered how moving I find them and how calming I find them to watch. I just think he's the best, and I think there's so much going on there. And Ikiru specifically is the movie that more than any other effectively answers the question, what is the meaning of life? Which I think is, no small accomplishment, and I'm excited to talk about it more.
Perhaps the meaning of life is just the friends we make along the way.
No.
But speaking of friends, Erin Brown, this is your first viewing of Ikiru, and from what you had told me, it sent you down a Kurosawa rabbit hole. Thank you, Luke, for creating yet another Kurosawa stand.
Oh, that's awesome.
I hadn't really seen any of his films. We watched, I think, part of Ron in high school in one of my classes, and I don't remember why. If I remembered which class we watched it in, it would make more sense, but I think it was like social studies.
Probably English literature, because it's an adaptation of King Lear.
Yeah, it's King Lear, but I don't think it was English. I don't know. I don't remember what class. That's why it's weird. It's like, it would make sense if it had been an English class, but I don't think it was, so I don't know why we watched it, and I don't think we watched the entire thing. I think we only watched it for like one class and then never got back to it. So this was my first time actually sitting down and watching a Kurosawa film, and it was really good. I mean, I shouldn't sound surprised by that. I really shouldn't. He's a big deal for a reason. Yeah, there was a lot to it. And like Luke said, it boils down to what is a life for? What are we here to do? And watching this guy go through that was fascinating.
Thanks, Erin. Jennifer, Kurosawa is known mostly for his samurai films, such as the famous Seven Samurai, which remade in the United States multiple times, but most famously as The Magnificent Seven, or films like Rashomon. But this was one of his modern-day films. How do you think this captured your vision of 1950s Japan?
I've seen some of the samurai movies. I had not seen this film. I can't speak to 1950s Japan other, I guess, than what I saw in the film. I am very interested, open-minded, open heart, open whatever, ready to listen to Luke's excitement, your excitement, and Erin's excitement about this film and what you saw in it. I see the story. I felt it was I watched it through and felt like it was a version of the Scrooge or Christmas Story, which always brings me to tears every year is when I watch different versions of it, right? That self-reflection on what's the meaning of life. I have more to say about that and the themes and the stuff I got from it, but I'm really excited to learn. I didn't go to film school, Luke, and I love hearing different things from different people and learning about stuff. So I am excited to learn while we talk today.
Thanks, Jennifer. Audra, Angelique.
So Kurosawa is one of my favorite directors that I've learned from years ago. And I remember watching Rashomon, and I remember thinking, this is kind of the meta awareness of how I see things. I'm always looking at everything from everybody else's perspective, and I'm always trying to understand everybody's perspective before I make any sort of decision myself. And that's why I love the way that story is told. It reminded me of Judgment at Nuremberg, which is one of my favorite films as well. And I also love everything about Ikiru. Both of these films kind of changed my life in film and how I look at making films from different characters' perspectives, right? It's almost like a masterclass in thinking about that as a writer and as a director and and an actor, all of the things, right?
Now, this is considered to be an adaptation of Day in the Life of Ivan Ilyich, which, if it is an adaptation, it's an extraordinarily loose one. Ivan Ilyich, just so you know, is actually a rather high-up member of the Court of Justice who, after an accident, is convalescing and going through a rather painful illness and death, and spends the first half of the novel questioning why someone who has lived such a good life has been sentenced to be tortured, and if God exists, why would God allow him to sit in so much pain? And in the second half realizes that the life that he has led is not as good as he thought, and that to live is to be humble. Ivan Ilyich lives a carefree life that is most simple and most ordinary, and therefore most terrible. The film opens with an X-ray, and an off-screen voice tells us that a man with the earliest stages of stomach cancer is pictured here, but the man doesn't know it yet. We fade in on a man with glasses doing bureaucratic work. The sign says Public Affairs Station, and Kurosawa shoots this with a 35mm lens, so the huge stacks of paper behind him loom in perfect focus, and you see him as almost a prisoner of paperwork. How did this opening scene work for you, Luke Higginson?
Yeah, it's great. Great opening. Really sets up the world, and the sort of a repeated theme throughout a lot of Kurosawa's films is a sort of a frustration with systems, with sort of bureaucracies and hierarchies of power, which is sort of contrasted with how much he loves people and sort of this deep love of humanity that he has, and sort of those two things clashing against each other, I think is the core of a lot of his movies, certainly his ones that take place in the modern day. And this one probably the most. And, you know, I think that early montage of the women trying to find someone to handle their problem is extremely relatable to anyone that's trying to get anything done. Yeah, I just think it sets up everything really well.
And it provides a bit of humor too,
Yes.
as we see the line of complaints, and they circle around and they come all the way back to the original desk that they started at. But how did this opening work for you, Erin and Jennifer? And what were your thoughts on the type of film that you were about to watch?
For me, totally relatable, dealing in the world of advocacy and trying to get things done with
Mm-hmm.
local and state government. I did find that amusing and cyclical and relatable and frustrating. And the other cool thing was the stylistic framing. Like many of the films we've been watching, some of the people really make paintings out of each shot. Like, do you know what I mean? Other than the flow, they're really conscious of places and framing. As there's lots of squares and split angles, which is the thing I
Yeah.
hope you guys talk about. Like there's a center line, but stuffed right to left of center, lots of squares, and then there's diagonals that go. Anyways, I like that part. So it was a good start and relatable for sure. And someone said, yeah. What was the yeah?
Oh, sorry. I was just agreeing with you. I think his framing is incredible. And the way
Bureaucracy sucks.
yes,
Yeah.
and, but yeah, and the way that everyone is literally framed by the bureaucracy that is holding them up is pretty great.
Framed and drowning in it, right? Like
Yeah.
builds.
Exactly.
And as someone who's had to select lenses for a film yourself, and Kurosawa was later known for his innovative use of telephoto lenses. Here he's using nothing too wide an angle, so the space doesn't look large. It makes the space look cramped, and almost every shot with between the 35 to 50 millimeters that he's constantly shooting, you feel you're in an enclosed space, even when he's out in the city because of his lens choice. Until later, we'll talk about when he starts to use the telephoto lens to move the camera slightly away. But his ability to create it feels like a Kafka-esque world outside of, and it almost feels surreal, doesn't it? Because of his lens choice.
Kafkaesque is a good way to describe it. I think that's very much what he's got in mind there.
All I ever hear is, Gregor Samsa awoke on the heart of his back when you said
Yeah.
it. But yes, he'll never get over that line.
A girl named Toya is caught giggling and is forced to read what she finds funny, and she reads it out. A man refusing to take a vacation, not because City Hall cannot run without him, but because it would realize that they don't need him. We then flash back to our hero. He once tried to do something useful, and there's an insert shot of an inefficiency report he once wrote, and we see him take something for his stomach pain, and the narrator tells us that the pain will get much stronger before he can begin living.
The narrator was kind of a dick.
Yeah.
He was just like such a grumpy narrator that didn't seem to like the protagonist at all.
It's a trope I'm actually fond of. I like when omniscient narrators are mean to the characters that they're in the stories. I think it's always funny.
Can you say more about that? Why?
Oh, I just think it always feels a little unexpected. Like I think, we're used to narrator being some version of, our hero does this, our hero does this. There's something that to me is sort of always slightly interesting or sort of off-putting in a good way about sort of realizing that the person telling the story has disdain for the lead character in it. It's just something I find sort of emotionally interesting.
And here, the deadpanness of it makes it almost darkly comic,
yes,
in a way.
I think there's a bunch of things in this movie that are actually quite funny, which is for such a sort of austere movie. I think there's quite a bit of humor in it.
It's interesting that the narrator never calls him our hero; he always calls him our protagonist. So I think that's another layer of doesn't like him very much. But yeah, it did have a lot of comedic moments too. I thought the whole runaround with the ladies trying to get the park built was really funny. I thought depressing and funny at the same time.
Yeah.
And our hero, our protagonist, is actually named Watanabe, but we don't know his name at this point. We don't until he gets to the doctor's office. So he's not even named. He's just our protagonist at this point.
Yeah.
Which I think adds to kind of the dark humor of the piece.
Yeah.
But speaking of dark humor, the next is that montage of the bureaucratic nightmare where these mothers are trying to get the sewage reservoir turned into a park. Pest control is shown swatting a fly with a fly swatter. And they go, after going from one council to the next, to the next, to the next, they, at the end, are led all the way back to our hero Watanabe's desk. Again, besides being absolutely relatable and darkly comic, I thought showed a real tie-over between 1952 post-war Japan and the United States, because you could totally see this in any major city in the United States today.
The fact that we didn't find out his name until he's at the hospital, it helps to show that he's just like another cog in the machine. He's just part of the bureaucracy, so it doesn't matter what his name is. He's just part of all the bullshit that the government is doing.
We can talk more about this later, but one of the other things I find interesting about this movie is the many parallels it has to his earlier film Drunken Angel, which is sort of one that he sort of considers his first film that he was fully happy with. And that film also stars Shimura, the lead of this film, as a doctor in sort of immediate post-war Japan. And in the backdrop of that film, there's sort of all of these cesspools around the neighborhood and the city that are sort of these sort of festering pits that are, metaphors for moral rot in everyone around them and the country as a whole. And I just find it quite moving that sort of the underlying mission and plot of this film is to fill a hole, sort of not unlike those cesspools in this movie. Like it feels, Drunken Angel is a very cynical movie, and this sort of feels like almost a bit of an emotional reclamation of that idea a little bit. And yeah, it's just a thing that I find interesting.
And filling in the cesspool to make a park for children.
Exactly.
It's like, let's make things better for the future. Plus, I mean, you have to imagine like how important children were at this point because of all the destruction of the war and how many civilians were killed. Doing something that's all about, let's help these kids, let's build a better future, starting with one park. I thought that was pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up Drunken Angel, Luke, because the next scene when he goes to the hospital to get his test results reminded me a lot of Kurosawa's criticism of the Japanese medical system in Drunken Angel.
Mm-hmm.
But this, I think, is shot a lot more subtly. And you can see that he had become much more masterful with his camera placement and also with the way that he's able to gain performances, because Drunken Angel is shot with these kind of, the whole medical scene is shot with these extreme close-ups that make the characters look grotesque. And this is shot from a much more discreet distance, but and allows to get better performances out of the actor. So the next scene, at least the next important scene, I think, is when a fellow patient is describing his symptoms to Watanabe, who doesn't know that he has stomach cancer yet, and is describing what stomach cancer is. And you have him in the background calmly telling Watanabe, as you have Watanabe's face in the foreground in this as wide an angle as Kurosawa uses. So it's only about 35 millimeters. It's not a extraordinarily wide angle, but with both in complete focus with a lot of depth of field. And you are focusing on Watanabe's face as he realizes, as he's ticking off every single one of these. Oh, I have this symptom. Yes, I have this symptom. And it is just an extraordinarily masterful shot, and it's done in only a minute and a half with a still camera done from a hi-hat at about the level of somebody sitting like on a tatami mat. And if we're going to be talking about Ingmar Bergman in a couple of weeks in his film Wild Strawberries on a similar subject. We're going to be talking about Vittoria De Sica later with Umberto D. And I think this in 1952 it shows that Kurosawa is, even at this point, as good a master as any of the greats. in terms of camera placement and being able to express emotion and create poetry with the camera. I'd be interested in what other people thought of this scene, because to me it almost sticks out a little bit, because there's nothing else quite like it in the film. But did anybody else notice or think it odd, the framing of it?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I actually think it kind of sets up something that becomes a recurring visual motif, which is the shot of Shimura in the foreground with someone else in the background, sort of like Shimura is just sort of usually hanging his head or sometimes speaking, but it's always him being observed by someone else as he sort of despairs. Like in the first half of the movie, we see some version of that set up a bunch of times, and it's I don't know, I think it's a very interesting recurring visual, that it's sort of like he is those two shots of foreground background of Shimura just being absolutely destitute, and someone else being.
And it's a very beautiful motif all the way through it, especially when it's he and Toya, and the little wind-up rabbit later, and he keeps coming back to it. But there was just something about. And some of it's the chiaroscuro of the lighting. There's something about that scene that just, I can't put my finger on it, but it's like the difference between looking at a Rembrandt and a Salvador Dali. All the way through, I think this film is painted like a Rembrandt, and then there's this one shot that's just incredible, and that shot just sticks out to me as being just absolutely beautiful. But the other thing is, I think it should be different from the rest of the film in a way, although, like you say, it is a motif that he keeps going back to. But because I think it's also a centerpiece to the film, and driving the plot forward.
Mm-hmm.
That other patient that was describing the symptoms, he was like really enjoying doing that. That was so bizarre.
He puts his legs up on the table.
Yeah. and so he's like having a great time telling him all these terrible symptoms. And Watanabe is just horrified and terrified at the same time. And the motif of somebody observing him, it's interesting because people always get him wrong. They always misunderstand what's happening, and I think it starts with this patient who I don't think he necessarily misunderstands what's happening. He's just enjoying it way too much.
And when he does get in with the doctor, exactly what the patient told him was going to happen happens. They tell him, you can eat whatever you want. It's an ulcer and what have you, which the patient says is a code for you have 3 to 6 months to live. And of course, Kurosawa's camera lingers after Watanabe leaves, and the doctors affirm that, the guy's doomed. He's got stomach cancer. And this is a kind of a curious thing about Japanese culture, is that when somebody's dying, they don't tell them that they're dying, because at that point in Japanese history, their economy was so fragile that if a bunch of people who were dying went out and decided to run up a bunch of credit that they knew they wouldn't have to pay off, it could actually crash the whole economy. So the doctors were instructed not to tell people that. But what did you guys think of the kind of the dishonesty of the medical system, not informing this man that he was reaching his last days and him having to figure it out on his own?
I think it was unethical as hell. He should have known so he could get all of his affairs in order, or if there's any kind of treatment he could have. I don't know what the treatment would have been back then apart from surgery, but even then it, probably wouldn't have worked, but he deserved to know,
Or at least be able to change his diet.
Yeah. do something to help live a bit longer or be more comfortable. It's kind of interesting though, because when George VI was dying, they didn't tell him that he had cancer. They said he was going to be okay, and then he just died. So I guess they just did that.
Okay, but they gave him a heroin overdose so that he would die in time to make the evening paper, so that the Morning Herald wouldn't get it.
That's fucked up.
What a way to
True
go.
story. True story. True story. Well, hey, it's good to be king, Luke. So he returns home, and we see his son and daughter walk into a dark room, talking about buying a house with Watanabe's retirement money, and they turn on the lamp to see he's sitting in the room and can hear everything that they say. And instead of being embarrassed for having, been caught trying to spend the old man's money, they're upset that he was sitting in their room in his house. And we get the film's first flashback as it flashes back to his wife's funeral. Now, here's the biggest departure from Ivan Ivanovich. He is there. His wife and daughter are both still alive, and his wife is kind of the prototypical Russian nagging spouse. Whereas here we intercut between Watanabe at a shrine in his house to his wife. And at the funeral, but in a minute of film, Kurosawa is able to summarize, I think, what would have taken a whole chapter in a novel here in this tiny little flashback. And then I have one more flashback I want to talk about, which is we flash back to Mitzo, his son, being tagged out in a squeeze play in American baseball, which is clearly the batter's fault. When that happens, if you're going from first to second and the batter bats straight up at the shortstop before you can get to second, that is not your fault if you get tagged out. But the crowd boos him, and you can see he's actually lost pride in his own son. The difference between this and Ivan Ivanovich, Ivan spends most of the novel lamenting that he had led a good life and doesn't deserve to be punished. But these flashbacks set up a later scene where Watanabe is torturing himself because he feels like he hasn't led a good life. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it has to do with his son being the man that he raised.
Yeah, I mean, we see in this general time period, we see a couple of flashbacks that really show Watanabe's failures as a dad, and definitely we are introduced to the son and his wife as a couple of dicks, but his son is a dick that he has created, like the baseball thing of him sort of like losing pride in his son, and the scene where his son is on a gurney about to be taken in for an appendix removal, and that brutal line where he's like, "Dad, can't you come into the operating room with me?" And he's like, "No, son, I've got a lot of things to do." He is largely responsible for the person that his son has become, and I think that is one of the ways that he's sort of quite a complicated character. And I found the relationship. This is my first time watching the movie since having a child, and I was much more locked into the sort of the complicated nature of that relationship this time around.
Yeah, it's different when you've got a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine not being there if my son was having his appendix out.
Right? Yeah.
I would be there. I would always be there,
Exactly.
Well, and then he later complains to Toya that he made himself a mummy, because she nicknames him the Mummy, for his son's sake. And Toya has a great response, which is, "Did he ask you to become a mummy?"
Yeah. Toya's the best. Toya's right about everything.
That is true. And we'll get to her. Her. But speaking of her son being a dick, you see the son and the daughter, I'm sorry, now the daughter's not in that scene. You see the son having dinner with his uncle, and he says his father's been acting strange and tells him that he withdrew 50,000 yen. And the uncle basically says, he's got a mistress. That's the only possible explanation. But you also see Watanabe's work comes looking for him because, and I'm sorry I laugh, but this is some of the dark humor of the film. They can't get anything done because he took the stamp home, and they can't stamp any paperwork. But these are back-to-back kind of lighthearted scenes, almost knitted in to this because, of course, what we're going to talk about next becomes kind of dark.
The uncle's a jerk too. He's everybody in this movie is kind of an asshole, except Toyo. She's pretty cool, and Watanabe is trying to be less of an asshole, but everybody is such a dick. Yeah, and nobody understands Watanabe either. The uncle doesn't. That's his own brother, and he doesn't understand what might be happening because he's thinking how he would be acting. He's obviously got a mistress because I would have a mistress, and he says that in front of his wife. Talk about this is just how men are, and
Mm-hmm.
feel bad for her because she's married to that mess.
That mess, the flawed humanity really comes through. Oh, I
Go
have
ahead.
one thing from earlier I wanted to say, and I don't know where to drop it. But you had said that, Watanabe, and I, in old school way and literature way, looked it up. I was like, what's the origin of this name? What does it mean? And it means, to cross. I'm gonna get it right. Yeah, Wada is to cross, and Nabe is vicinity, area, or side. Like the name means ferryman,
Mm.
and I thought it was apropos with the theme of what I got out of the film. So I thought
Yeah,
that was a cool thing.
that fits. That's
Hopefully
really
that
good.
wasn't from the same book that told me that my favorite film is Akira is the same as your wife has very nice breasts for a woman her age.
I got it. I looked it up on the internet. I would have gone to the library or the Oxford English Dictionary. That's where I do these things. But I just I was like, what am I learning? What's happening with this? So I looked that up, and I thought it
I know.
was
Imagine the academic career I would have had if Google had just existed back then.
well. And I looked up Ikiru too at the end, which it's a verb that literally means or translate to live.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be used to mean to come to life or to be enlivened. Anyways,
See, it's
well, I
not
was
my
just
fault.
trying.
It's the Japanese language's fault.
Well, I wanted to know who wrote it, and maybe Luke knows. Because this is a adaptation, and Akira Kurosawa wrote it with other people, and they
Mm-hmm.
came up with these names, the title of the film, and Watanabe, which is interesting. So,
Yeah.
Actually, there was a big debate because the other writers on the screenplay thought that the name "To Live" was just called Watanabe originally, and thought it was pretentious, and fought Akira Kurosawa on it. They thought "To Live," yeah, too general and just pretentious. So that's kind of funny that you bring that up.
or two on the nose. Huh? Which one? Interesting. I thought it was cool when I looked it up. So,
I think Kurosawa was right.
I think so too. Although I did find that when they remade this recently and called it "Living," I thought "Living" was a terrible title. Like,
Agreed.
why would anybody? And it didn't do well at the box office. I didn't think it was a bad movie. It wasn't as good as this by any stretch of the imagination, But I can't. But what a terrible title! Who would just go see a movie called "Living"? Back to Watanabe. So he's walking around with 50,000 yen in his pocket, and he decides to try and kill himself by drinking alcohol with stomach cancer, where he meets a Playboy author who takes him out for a night of boozing and geishas. Again, unlike Ivan Ilyich, he is actively attempting to make himself suffer. As opposed to asking why God would make himself suffer, he is attempting to atone for a life he feels he has wasted, as opposed to asking why he must be punished after living such a good life. But he tells the man he has 50,000 yen in his pocket and has no idea how to spend it, and no one is easier to please than someone who says, "Hey, would you help me spend my own money?" Luke had referred to the repeated motif of having Watanabe in the foreground and the characters in the background. This has one of the better shots of that, as you see him with a suffering look on his face as the author tells one boring story after another of some sort of debauchery, and you see a bunch of trombones just kind of come into the frame, breaking our trance as an audience, but Watanabe's face stays completely still. It's in this that we get the very first use of the telephoto lens when a woman grabs Watanabe's hat behind a fishing net, and what this allows is for the figures to stick out against a flat, out of focus background, and you get a weaving throughout this scene of the use of the normal 35 to 50 millimeter lens and these telephoto shots, which I think elicit a slightly different performance, because I think, especially when you get to see this dance sequences and the geishas, the telephoto shots, they seem to be a lot less self-conscious. It's almost as if Kurosawa is using this to move the camera away from these non-actors who are playing the geishas and what have you. But it does work because it also allows for the interior to still feel, where a wider angle is going to make an interior of a club like that feel very large. You can still feel them being imprisoned, even though it has this large dance floor, by the fact that the telephoto lens is flattening and putting out of focus the backgrounds.
This whole sequence I want to talk about. I think it's really amazing. I think, first of all, just the filmmaking is incredible. Like this whole sort of sequence of their crazy night out that sort of kind of feels like it's enough for several nights out, but it's so high energy compared to the rest of the film, and it's so like there's all these exactly different sort of compositions, things flying in and out of the frame, and like you said, this idea of being in that amazing shot of that crowded dance floor of everyone dancing with their partners, and it just feels like an absolute nightmare to be in the middle of. What I love about this sequence is that sort of the easier way, or the more simplistic way for it to go, is sort of as an illustration of the shallowness and pointlessness of the sort of a life of debauchery, and how this is a false road for him to go down in a search for happiness and meaning. That feeling of sort of existential despair is maybe best shown in the longing, the meaningful look between the novelist and Shimura right before they get back into the car with the singing ladies.
And it's interesting. It's a lot of Western music. And one of the women dances the Charleston. This is the first time we hear Watanabe request the Gondola no Uta, the Life is Brief, fallen young, love young maidens. And we actually hear him sing, which this, of course, pays fruit later on in the film. But we actually hear him sing. And so this bright dance sequence suddenly becomes very somber as we see this very stiff-faced, very depressed, very drunk man stumbling over the lyrics of this rather beautiful, and to the people around him, dated song, as people just back away from him like, "Ooh, get away from me, old man, with your depressing shit."
Yeah. And that's what I was trying to get at, though, is that what I like about this whole sequence is that it is also notably in this montage is some of the first times that you see Watanabe smile or have fun or laugh. Like, there is a real joy to parts of the night, and that's sort of what I really think this whole sequence, this whole montage sort of really captures what it's like to spend a bunch of your time sort of going out and partying. And it's like, it captures the real highs of that, and also the sort of despairing existential lows of it. And it's one of the ways in which I think the film explores the many different facets of finding value in life. And I think it is making the argument that this is not the only way to go, and is definitely a path to sadness if this is the only thing you have, but that there is real joy in it, and that it's a way to embrace life that Watanabe has not done previously.
I was just going to point out that the ladies weren't geishas. It's a common misconception, because after World War II, sex workers would call themselves geishas when they were talking to American soldiers, but that's not what geishas are. So I just want to throw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very important distinction. Thank you very much. But I don't even think they were really sex workers.
It's unclear.
Yeah, it is unclear.
Maybe. Yeah.
I thought they might have been, because it seemed like that's what they were going for, was, they're going to drink and then find some ladies.
I had written in my note this sort of the guy in the bar, the visit from and time spent, and I put Mephistopheles, who's like that literary Hell's agent, Hell's messenger type thing. I mean, he was sort of twisted looking. He had a smile like, oh, and like, I don't know. I had this weird, uh, yes, like you said, opportunistic, his money, but also sort of this like vampiristic smile of, oh, I'm gonna, suck onto this. And then they went through that montage of all the stuff. And I thought that the transitions changed through that, like these side wipes. And I agreed, like, what with the horns breaking that fourth wall or coming in from the side, just I stopped and took a picture of it and videoed it. I was like, wow. I was like, what is happening here? Um, I thought that was interesting.
I want to take a moment to defend our novelist. I think he's fundamentally a good guy. Like he wants to show this sad old man a good time. Like his way of doing that is maybe a little flawed, but like he refers to himself as a benevolent Mephistopheles, but like he doesn't really do anything other than try to help an old man.
And can I ask one other thing? I mean, the hat was a big symbol of old hat, new hat, change of your hat, change of your perspective. It kept through. The the stealing of the hat, was it? I mean, I didn't go back and rewatch it, but it was quick, and then he was so defensive about it. You said it was a woman behind a veil, or did I mishear you? Now I want to find the scene and watch that scene again. Do you
It's a
remember
woman
it,
that
Luke?
steals his hat, and then the novelist convinces him to buy a new one instead of getting it back.
Yeah, no, I like the new one, and I like the difference. But the woman that steals it, didn't she just like grab it off his head, or did I miss?
I think there were
Yes.
two situations where his hat got stolen. One was the lady that was dancing, and he got it back from her. But then in the crowd, another woman took his hat.
Correct.
Thanks, Aaron.
Correct. And it's set up as kind of a joke that he's constantly chasing that hat, instead of enjoying his life. Audra,
No, this is fascinating though. I'm looking through my original notes on February 20th at 2023 when I first watched Ikiru, and it's like totally fascinating to look at these weird notes through every single scene. And the first thing I wrote was bureaucratic processes. That's the first note that I wrote about Ikiru.
It makes sense. That's what
Right.
it starts with.
Right. Bureaucratic processes. Desk triangle. Says name. Cool idea. Mockery of democracy. These days I don't feel alive unless my stomach hurts. Why did they lie to him? Shot from inside the car window. Oily skin laundry mat comment. Laundry comment. Doji screen. Baseball hat memory of son. Appendix. This is hilarious to read. This is crazy. They
It's
go
fun to
through the
go
whole
back
movie.
and
There's one that says sullen lech ? And I don't remember that moment.
Is that when his family are accusing him of being an old lech?
Yeah. Sullen lech ?
and they
Yeah.
cut to a picture. He's being accused of being an old lech, and then they cut right to a shot of him just looking depressed as shit, trying to drink himself to death.
Yeah, and the next note is balls, hat, stolen, white hat, carnival. Music drink. 30 years of not remembering anything but being bored. That, I remember that so vividly.
That's an amazing line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Toya, who we earlier heard telling the joke in the office, meets Watanabe in the street. She needs him to return to work immediately so he can stamp her paperwork so she can quit her job to go fulfill her dream of making toys. He doesn't have the stamp with him. It's at the house. She follows him to the house with mistaken identity and hilarity ensuing as his maid and his son and his daughter think that this is a mistress who has soaked him for 50,000 yen. As they are leaving, Watanabe notices that she has ripped stockings, buys her new stockings, which would cost her the equivalent of 3 months' salary, and he arranges to meet her later. This, I think, is the most important sequence in the film because this is where I think Watanabe becomes from a protagonist to briefly a villain because we see him almost attempting to sap the youth and life out of this young girl. Not in a perverted way, but even in a worse way to almost allow himself to be young vicariously through her, despite the fact that she is increasingly uncomfortable throughout the scenes.
I think there's a moment like Mephistopheles looking at Watanabe looking at Toya, right? That little grin, the vampire thing, like, oh my God, I can have youth, I can have energy. He's gonna watch her and go down that path with, you know, observing her, sucking it in. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. It's interesting though. I mean that a few things. I mean, we can come back to some earlier, but yeah, that crazy monologue he gives her in the restaurant before the happy birthday moment is, yeah, it's chilling. It's really creepy, but it is. I think it's interesting because he almost, I think, lands on what it really is that draws him to her, which is that she just knows how to enjoy life. She knows how to take pleasure in small things. She knows how to engage with the world around her, which is the thing that Watanabe has never done and never sort of taken the time to figure out how to do. Tying back to that incredible line, reflecting on his 30 years and saying, all I remember is just being busy, and even then I was bored, is the crux of how he has wasted his life. And it's sort of what makes, Jen, you mentioned A Christmas Carol earlier, and it's what I think makes this film, I love A Christmas Carol, but it's what makes this film a little different in its sort of analysis of a wasted life, in that it's not that he was overly cruel, although he was cruel to his son a little bit as well, but it's that it is the idea of doing stuff all the time while doing nothing, and doing nothing of value and nothing of substance, and taking no joy in anything. And that's, I don't know, I think that is a specific,
well, and this is the scene
idea.
where this is the scene where he tries to say that because she's talking about the different nicknames that she's given people in the office, and she says, well, I didn't know you the way I do now, but it was the mummy. And he explains that he's worked like a mummy for 30 years for his son's sake. And she turns it around on him and says, did he ask you to work yourself like a mummy?
Exactly.
And she's right. Yeah.
Well, and Toya, the minute you said to go chase her dream, if I understood what I remembered, is that she literally just said, I gotta go. And they're like, why? She's like, I'm bored. Like, I gotta go. Like, whether it's, not her dream of making toys, like she's working like a dog in the rabbit factory.
Later on, we'll get to that scene because we haven't got to that scene yet.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. But I'm saying she leaves because she's bored.
But you're right. At that time, it wasn't her dream. You are correct.
Oh, no, I remember. Right. The dream of every child. Yeah, I remember. But she leaves because she's bored. Like, she's aware very quickly. This is pointless. It's bureaucracy. It's boring. She ain't doing it 30 years. She's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Here's.
And this is the whole point of people now questioning. People need to be questioning why they're doing what they're doing. If something doesn't bring you joy, why are you doing it?
Exactly.
If you are doing things just because there are systems created by us that create you to be a mummy, why are you doing those things? And that's why I love Kurosawa, because it hits on these points. We're talking back in, 80 years ago now, and it's still the same thing, and it's never not going to be the same thing. Why are people doing these things that are part of a system that they didn't create, right? We can create other systems.
Yes. Agreed.
And I'm just wondering, what did they mean by mummy? I think I didn't get that metaphor.
Oh, I mean,
like
for me, yeah,
Sorry.
like a corpse, like somebody doing something that is not of their own volition, that they have to be doing because it's part of the systematic process of living in a place where you have to spend something that's fake, like money, to do any of these things, plus so much time, which becomes currency, right? So much time to do things. So when you're a mummy, you're just doing without thinking about doing that or wanting to be doing that, right? That's how I took that.
Okay, that makes sense.
All of
So like,
that and like a zombie mummy.
yeah, zombie.
But we get this scene.
Yeah.
We get this scene where he realizes that his son is the boy he raised or didn't raise. Again, this is where I think this differs from the novel Ivan Avilovich, because he is realizing all along, you know, these are the mistakes that I've made through life, where it takes Ivan being taken almost to the point of death before Ivan realizes that he had not lived a good life. And what was, in the novel's terms, deserving of his suffering. He does not complain about his fate from this moment on. And he goes home and he's about to tell his son that he's dying of cancer, but his son starts quizzing him about the woman, calling her a gold digger, accusing him of having a mistress. And when he's about to pipe up and tell him this, he just keeps quiet. And to some people, this is considered a flaw in the film, because they're just like, oh, I hate it when movies do this, which is that the plot moves forward because the guy doesn't tell the main character doesn't tell the person the most important thing. But to me, the son didn't deserve to hear that information. How would he have expected his son to react to that? The boy that he raised. I don't think it's a flaw in the film. I actually think it adds a layer of depth and tells us everything that we need to know about the relationship between this father and son.
I think it's extremely in character for Watanabe to get derailed and not end up expressing what he wanted to express initially. And it's like, yeah, I mean, again, the son is being an unbelievable dick there, but like, that's Watanabe's whole thing, is that he won't speak up for himself. He won't pursue what he wants to pursue. He won't do what he wants to do, and he will blame others for it. But you know, I think it's very in character, and it's interesting whether the son deserves to know that. I mean, like I said, he's being a huge asshole there. I still think Watanabe should have told him, but I think it's completely in character for him to have not told him.
But do you think that on an emotional basis, or as far as for the film?
The way the film plays out is the correct way for the film to play out, because I think it's in character for Watanabe to not say. But
that's a great
I think for him as a person, I think it would have been good for him to tell his son.
Well, and to me, it makes sense that that took place. It doesn't seem like that was a mistake at all, because parents don't often tell their children what's happening, and that's part of the whole emotional crux of this particular thing in the film, in my opinion.
And the doctor didn't even tell him he was dying. So,
yeah.
You know, in Japanese culture, you just don't talk about these things, I guess.
I think it makes sense that he didn't tell his son. I think Luke's right. It fits the character. He didn't tell anybody, honestly, but the son wouldn't have. I don't know how the son would have reacted. I don't know what good it would have done to tell him, honestly.
So we move on. He goes to Toya. Toya has feeling incredibly uncomfortable, which the film, I think, implies, because she says something about a May-December romance later, that she thinks he's up to something kind of pervy and no good, where the film is implying that what is really happening is that he is living vicariously through her youth and using it to keep himself distracted about his own mortality. But she agrees to go out for one last fun night, and he takes the opportunity to confess to her that he is dying, where he has a memory of almost drowning in a pond as a child and feeling as far away from his parents as he now feels from his own children, knowing that he is going to die, and talks about how jealous he is of Toya. And she says, well, all I do is work and eat. But the one thing that does make her excited is these wind-up rabbits toys that she makes. And that brings her joy, knowing that she can share joy with all of the little babies who buy them. And she pulls out one of the rabbits and says, why don't you try making something too? And in the, I think, best done scene in the film, he decides to dedicate himself to one last act. He grabs the wind-up rabbit as a chorus of young people sing happy birthday to a friend in the background in English, and he has finally decided to live. So in a way, I think Kurosawa is using this to tell us that this is his birthday, in terms of he is now actually living a life for the first time. But there's a great shot of the young girl staring into space with a freak out look on her face as Watanabe rushes away. He returns to work the next day as his white hat alerts all of his coworkers he's there, and he digs out a petition to convert that cesspool into a children's park from the beginning of the film and gives it to Ono, who's his assistant, who wants his job. And then, at the 1 hour and 32-minute mark, the film jumps ahead 5 months to his funeral.
You were mentioning it. I completely agree with what you were saying about what Kurosawa is trying to do with the birthday song. I also just love that moment so much because when he gets up initially and goes down the stairs and everyone starts singing Happy Birthday, it really does feel like they're singing it to him, which is very strange. And it almost makes you wonder if the film is suddenly doing some kind of surrealist thing or magic realism or something. And then as he passes the camera, suddenly we revealed the woman that they're actually singing to. So again, it wasn't even about him. And I think that's just such a great moment. That's such a fun moment. That whole scene with Toya, that last scene with Toya is so harrowing. But yeah, like you say, it kickstarts him into being the man that he will become before he dies.
And it reminds me of how we're all connected, right? When something's happening in somebody else's world, that it somehow reflects something that's happening in someone else's world, right?
Yeah.
How we're all connected. And that's how I see that.
I love that.
Yeah, I saw that in that moment and the birthday stuff. The other thing I thought that came through was Toya. I think it was a duplicity thing, and that she's like, all I do is work and work, eat, sleep. But that's not true. You already saw that she enjoys the gift of every present moment, even in that world. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes it's a frenzy and stuff, but she has the gift of the present down.
exactly.
Okay, but I was a young person many years ago, and I appreciated the present too. Also, if you were to tell me I was ever going to die, I might pretend like I believed you, but there was no way you were actually going to convince me of it.
You can still embrace every moment, Eric. It's not too late. You can get it back.
Kid. Goddamn kid.
And
Off
that's
my
like
lawn.
something interesting that I do with people is one thing is having them write their obituaries, right? Because it totally shifts your perspective on your life that you're living.
I think the scene with Toya was another case where he was misunderstood. It's his own fault. And I think a lot of the times it is his own fault because he doesn't open up about anything. And so, I mean, what was Toya supposed to think? You know, this old guy wants to take her out all the time and buy her stuff. That would be pretty unsettling. Yeah, I mean, it's a recurring theme of the whole film so far is that they don't really know who he is. And I don't think he even knew who he was until he decided to build the park.
That's really
Yes.
interesting because that prompted me to
I love
think
that,
about.
Eric.
Yeah, that prompted me to think about how we judge each other, right? So you're looking at this character and you're looking at what that character is doing and what they're focusing on. And then we're having our own visceral reactions and we're judging like, a relationship between an older person and a younger person, right? It's just this whole film. And this is what the magic of Kurosawa is, in my opinion, is like looking at the major things that really matter in philosophy. The judgment that we have as the audience, the irony that's created between like the audience and what we're seeing in the characters and what they're doing and what kind of judgment it brings out in us and those reactions, those feelings, that's the magic of film, right? So I find it super fascinating when that took place, I remember thinking that too when I was watching it, like the young and the old relationship and how that's seen in that culture versus our culture. I don't know. It just was really interesting to me. But
Well, and
the
this
point I
whole
was,
second
yeah,
act, and the whole second act is about how it's seen in that culture because we're
right.
seeing his life through other people's eyes for the last almost hour of this film. So as I mentioned, at an hour and 32 minutes, the film jumps ahead 5 months to his funeral, and reporters are asking the assistant mayor if Watanabe built the park and its city hall is hogging the credit. We see a shrine built to Watanabe, and we are told by the reporters that Watanabe died in the park he helped build, and the rumor going around that he let himself freeze to death as protest for not getting the credit he deserved. An autopsy shows it was actually cancer, and he had a hemorrhage. The deputy mayor continues to try to minimize Watanabe's contributions. He even blames the press and the citizens for, and I quote, not knowing how government works. But at this moment, in a very beautiful scene, the residents show up to the funeral to burn incense to the man they watch tirelessly work to get the park finished in their neighborhood. And you see all the women that you saw at the beginning of the film petitioning to get that park done, stop to give their respects. All of them are in tears and cannot even control their grief at this man that they have come to love for his tireless work. And their obvious grief, because it puts the lie to the deputy mayor's story, he finds a excuse to leave. And this will move to the larger, longer ending section, but any thoughts on this scene and on the unusual way this sets up, almost skipping over the plot of the film to have it shown in some kind of flashback or retrospect? Because, of course, in any other type of telling of this story, that would be the story. The hurdles that he goes through to get this park built. Kurosawa just skips over that and says, okay, yeah, and the park got built and he died.
I don't think that's as important to the story as the story of him becoming the guy that built the park. I think that's why it was all flashbacks. Because the guy at the beginning of the film would not have done that. And he didn't do that. He, the petitioners came, they wanted to have the park built, and he passed that on to the next department until it came all the way back to his department again. It takes finding out he's dying and all the events that lead up to him realizing that he needs to do something with his life. That's the main part of the story. I do like that that's what he did. And it is very important because he actually, did something good that made him feel good and made things better for a lot of people. I agree that most movies would be that he builds the park and then he dies, but it wasn't really about the park as much. It was about being somebody who does something with their life. Because what else is a life for if you're not going to do anything with it?
And Luke Higginson, I'm going to take what Erin said and go one step further. And I think one of the things that makes this film not just a great film the way most Kurosawa films are, but one of the great masterpieces is this narrative technique where he is subtracting the more routine plot elements that you would see in a procedural telling of this story and allowing it to be narrated from a second point of view, which is something he does often in other masterpieces such as Rashomon, for instance, and Yojimbo are both stories where large amounts of the story are told from a different point of view. But I would go one step further and not just say that what we're watching is the real story, but what makes this a masterpiece as opposed to just a very, very good film on a very touching subject is that narrative technique, and is that is the story that Akira Kurosawa is telling.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think it's amazing, and it's so unique, and it makes it so that the film takes a sort of a wider view of a life that actually had some purpose and some meaning to it, and it shows it has a sort of a very clear-eyed view of the obstacles and the difficulties that one can face when beyond sort of the epiphany of deciding to do something worthwhile with one's life or deciding to help people. That's sort of what I like about it, is it sort of goes the step beyond the epiphany, where it sort of is very clear-eyed about the struggles of that, the struggles involved in trying to do that, and the obstacles, both sort of institutional and just based in human personality and frailty, and the idea of like what you're doing for credit versus just to do it. And I just think it opens up a lot of really fascinating and sometimes difficult ideas. And I love it. I love the second half of the movie.
Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating to me about that funeral scene is how they're arguing over who gets the credit.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the crux to me of why that scene is placed where it is and why it happens. Just what you just said, Luke, right? Arguing over who's getting the credit. So why are you doing what you're doing in the
Well,
life
and
that you're
Angelique,
living?
let me ask you: do you think Watanabe would have cared whether he got credit?
No,
By the
I
time he
don't. I
died,
mean,
no.
well,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's what's so fascinating about the characters too in Kurosawa films is that both are true, right? You can care about those things.
So, are
You
you saying
can.
it's a Rashomon situation?
To me, at least, the version of Watanabe that is on the swing in the snow, presumably moments before he died, I think that version of him could not care less about the credit. I think that is
happy that he got it done.
Mhm.
Yes, I believe so.
And I think
that,
we all want to believe, as the audience, that he doesn't care.
and I
about
think,
the
but I think
credit.
that's the point of that, and it is. I think the point is that people will be debating it, and other people will care sort of deeply about it one way or the other. But
and isn't that the brilliance of this narrative?
Oh, yeah, the point is that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
isn't that the brilliance of this narrative that we're hearing it from other people's point of view, so we don't have the weight of what our protagonist in inverted commas expectations are, because we're hearing what happened through other people's point of view after his death. We're
That's
not
the genius,
following
yeah.
him through this. Isn't that the genius of this as a plot, as a piece of screenwriting? This is so brilliant on so many levels. And as a piece of filmmaking, what is great about it is he's able to do this transition in a way that is shocking, but you are never once confused as to what's going on, which I think is incredibly difficult to do. I have a hard time transitioning from one subject to the next when editing a podcast. I cannot imagine how many rewrites he had to go through on this screenplay to make this transition as smooth as it is.
The transition in the film from one to before death, after death, the funeral, or something else?
At the hour and 32-minute mark, where he says, "I'm going to go do something great with my life," and 5 months later, we're at his funeral.
Yeah,
beautiful. The mourners move into a tighter circle, sitting on the floor, and each speak in turn about Watanabe's change in character. Why would he suddenly decide to dedicate him to a part after dedicating an entire life to being a tight ass? His son enters and says he doesn't believe Watanabe knew that he had stomach cancer, and his brother still thinks that he had a mistress that changed him, and others say that the mistress would explain the white hat. But in a flashback, we see him surveying the cesspool in the pouring rain. They discuss how he, in inverted commas, forgot the rules, and by sheer will and tenacity got the different departments to help build the park. And in a wonderful long dolly shot, the most camera motion in the entire film, we see him bring the mothers from the neighborhood into the city hall to plead their case. And he goes into the deputy mayor's office, who tells him to just let the project die. But he won't leave the office and simply keeps asking the deputy mayor to reconsider. The throwback Luke was talking about to that opening shot in the hospital, where you see his long-suffering face, where in this case it's the deputy mayor behind him sitting down at a desk and just kind of nonchalantly acting. And this is a brilliant throwback because it's framed almost to the point where you have to be reminded of him at the hospital learning about his diagnosis for cancer at that moment. And I think it's just a beautifully done shot.
Yeah. And he really does, we haven't said this specifically yet, but Shimura might have the single best face in cinema. Like, it's just so much of this film rests on just how unbelievably expressive and like immersive that face is.
And it was for such a long time. Erin and I were joking before this because she was like saying, "Well, I didn't know Shamir was only my age when he made this," and I was like, "He was playing characters younger than this in Ron in the 1980s. He was still."
Can do it all.
So one of the mourners says Watanabe's work was the only thing that kept him alive, but in a flashback, we see him threatened by a group who wants to build a red light district, and he just looks on defiantly. You can't threaten a dying man's life. But the mourners realize he knew he didn't have long to live, and use that as an excuse for their own inaction, until one points out, we could all die at any moment. They are constantly attempting to defend themselves as they get drunker and drunker and pile on. You're not supposed to do anything at City Hall. Doing anything is considered radical. You're supposed to look like you're doing something while doing nothing, which I think is both the most blackly comic and truest line in the entire film.
It really captures drunk bullshitting, emotional drunk bullshitting very well. It's great.
It is interesting how much funeral culture is the same worldwide. You know, whether it's Irish culture, whether it's Minnesota, it's a bunch of people getting drunk and regretting their own lives regretting the mistakes they made in their own lives, as opposed to thinking about the person who's passed away.
Yeah, I mean, this whole film and everything Kurosawa makes, in my opinion, is very like the whole concept of nothing has any meaning, right? Unless you give it the meaning that you're going to give it. And all of the lessons in all of the films, to me, that I've seen are the same narrative. It's the same lesson. Think about what you are wanting to do and do that. Because if you're just going to go along being a mummy, being a zombie, going along with the systems that have been created, then guess what? You're probably going to die and have regrets. And you might die of something that you don't even realize that you're dying of, i.e. cancer, right? Or whatever.
Well, and it's the Mifumi the samurai, Mifumi the shogun turned warrior for the peasants in Seven Samurai. It is the Ronin turned protector of the village in Yojimbo. It is
becoming your own hero.
The woodcutter with the baby at the end of Rashomon.
You're right. That does tie these things together quite well.
Yeah,
Jennifer,
I really like
Erin,
that. Kurosawa fundamentally makes movies about the importance of giving a shit about other people in the world around you.
Exactly.
It's what I love about him. Yeah.
Same.
Maybe it's just my perspective, but that perspective of reflection, inward, outward, otherwise, giving meaning and layered meanings to things, I don't know, that's part of my jammy jam or my joy in life. So maybe I'm already in the gift of the present moment of what's happening. But interesting. And it's interesting what you're talking about, because I get that's part of funeral culture, but I also think there's a reflection on both sides. And to the point that Audra made earlier, I get the point of, writing your own obituary. But the other thing that I try to do all the time, people go through life, saying things or waiting to say things at a wedding, at a funeral, whatever. And I really live by or try to be like, say what you got to say today. Tell people how they matter, how they impact you, how they make the world better or grander, or even through simple acts of bringing a park. Like on some level, the bureaucracy of that was out of control, right? It seemed unsurmountable. And not only Watanabe's department, but every single department passed the buck and pointed and moved down. And he wasn't the only mummy struggling through in that world, right? The reflection of his life rippled out, was a ripple effect to all of them, which we got to towards the end. And that sort of thing, I think, is true, in our lives. Like the joy of being in this room and talking about films and these things matters.
Do you think it's the lubrication of alcohol that allows people to become that self-reflective in front of each other?
So I don't drink or do drugs, so no.
Yeah,
Other
I
people,
don't think
maybe,
so.
yes.
Well,
But yeah, maybe.
okay, but as
Yeah.
a white cis male, that's the only way I'm allowed to ever cry or hug another man.
Well,
I do think um, alcohol being a social lubricant, you know, is important to a lot of people. The best deep conversations I have with my brother involve a lot of alcohol because we were just raised to not say anything, and you know, it's it's great when people can actually express themselves and say what needs to be said, you know, without that, without the crutch that is alcohol. But anyway, that's just a tangent, I think.
No, it's a real
I
thing.
don't think it's a tangent. I think it's a
Mhm.
real thing that
No, it's
it is systemic, not just in our culture, global centuries of culture. It is systemic
and
that
without alcohol, my two children would never have been born.
oh my goodness.
And
Uh
the world would be a worse place without them.
well, it's a concrete fact that points to yes, I'm saying the other side of it, but it is true that people need it to dance, to talk, to ask people out, to celebrate, to be sad, to we have and yeah, it's a thing.
We're
It's a
we're
big
yeah, and
thing.
if we
It's a
guys.
had
big
a society that was so different because people actually reflected on films by Kurosawa, right, in mass, wouldn't that be amazing?
Well,
Because you
we
might not
do.
need
We do.
alcohol
It's
to
called the world. We do have such a society. It's called the World Cinema History Listenership.
boom.
yeah.
We're building a better
Yeah.
world. It's good.
Let's hear from you all in the comments. Is life better or worse with alcohol? You decide. Moving on to the final scene. A woman brings in Watanabe's white hat. A policeman found it in the park. The policeman lights incense at Watanabe's shrine as the son holds the white hat. The policeman then testifies that the last few minutes of Watanabe's life he sat on a swing at the park he built singing the Gondola no Uta that he sang at the beginning. And it is one of the most beautiful and powerful scenes in film, and it begins. You're seeing it through a jungle gym, through a telephoto lens, so we're observing it from the policeman's point of view. Again, the coda, the visual poetry of Kurosawa, the telephoto lens being this is someone else's point of view, and then the camera cuts straight in front with a normal 35 millimeter telling us that this is what we're seeing as we see him swing. And all we can see is that for the very first time, he's smiling. It fades in on the uncle asking why Watanabe's girlfriend isn't there, and if maybe they weren't dating. We see a close-up of the wind-up rabbit at his shrine. As the bureaucrats all swear to change, but then are shown going back to work the next day to do the same as they always have. But the film ends with one bureaucrat overlooking children frolicking in a new playground and admiring the sky just the way Watanabe had. We all want to change, says the film, but we're not going to. I want to have six-pack abs. Not actually enough to give up carbs or do any exercise. However, we all want to change the world, but do we really want to ever put in the effort? And that to me is the moral of this. But you do have that one bureaucrat staring at those children and staring at the sky. And you wonder to yourself, is what Watanabe did, getting that one park done, making that one ripple, enough?
Yeah, no, that's what I love about the ending is, yeah, I think Kurosawa is a cynical optimist. Like, I think he's very clear-eyed about the fact that it's much easier to have an epiphany that you want to change the world than to actually do it. And so I think it would be untrue and saccharine if you sort of suddenly saw everyone completely changed the next day. But, he made a park for those kids, and that other bureaucrat is thinking about his life differently. Like, there's hope. I think it is a happy ending without being unrealistically, saccharine.
I'm stuck on the funeral scene still, and I can't get past it because I forgot to mention when all the women come in. When the women come in, they change the whole narrative of how emotions are allowed in the scene. And it goes on for minutes and minutes.
You could no longer deny that this was Watanabe's doing after that. And the grief on their faces. Yeah, and that's why the deputy mayor flees.
Right. And the emotions, nobody's having any emotions. They're all trying to subdue any sort of emotions. And that's a cultural thing, but it spans all cultures in some way. And then you have a group of women coming in and actually emoting. And only because of them, you see little shot after shot after shot of men now conforming to being allowed to share their emotions. And it's like the most powerful part of that funeral scene. And I completely forgot to mention that.
And it is almost like when they burn the incense, it releases the men in a way. Jennifer, your thoughts on the final shot of Ikiru?
I agreed with what, Luke had said about the happy ending without too far over the top. I was all excited at the cinematic framing through the jungle gym from a different angle. And I went through this whole thing in my head of we can't let his life be in vain, and a flashback to Let the Right One In, and the visual of the jungle gym and a different use of it, right? A lower camera angle at the side.
Much better.
Use of jungle gym,
And
right? I
better
always
jungle
use
gym.
a better jungle gym and better use of jungle gym. I always like good use of dog or whatever. So good use of jungle gym and at an angle. So I thought it was really like, if you remember it, it's layered, it's wide, then narrower, 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 narrower framing into him. And it was also
Well,
a little bit off.
he's shooting of the telephoto lens, so the bars are actually out of focus, and he's got the focus in on Watanabe.
Which
Yeah.
isn't that on purpose? Because the jungle gym, in essence, is not the focus. The focus are the people and their consciousness. And the jungle gym is almost like a
Well, or
representation of
Audra,
life.
is that the repeated motive of the imprisonment that
Yeah,
you see all the way through?
that
Like,
can,
shot at we're
yeah,
imprisoned by paperwork. We're imprisoned by that netting
yes.
at the nightclub. When he's shooting through something, there's a visual motif, and he's telling you something about our lives as people inside this cage that we call American society, Japanese society.
Society in general, exactly. And when it's blurred and you can see the person through it, that's also a different on purpose, in my opinion, on purpose choice.
I also think he did another, which comes through the scene, which I mentioned earlier, which is there's a central line. He really obsessed over the angle he shot through the jungle gym, in my opinion. Like he moved around and decided this is it. Because there's the central line that's vertical up and down, very strong. The left side of the frame is angling in from like 11 to 7 in on that focal point. And
It's a painter's rule of thirds. He uses the perfect painter's rule of thirds,
oh my
but he
God, and
uses
the
it
right side.
for every shot in this film. For everything is
Yeah,
rule of thirds.
Yeah.
yeah.
You always see Watanabe in one of the rule of thirds spots every single shot in this film. And that's, you could take a table book of this film and just flip through, and you would look at 30 or 40 masterworks, I think.
And he
It's literally
found again a parallel. Sorry, Audra. The swing poles. Remember earlier I said there's the slanted ones that go from like, oh, people don't know a clock, but I'm going to do it anyways, at like 8 up to 1. That exact framing, I agree. Like if you took a table book, you could literally use translucent overlays and lay over some of the lines that come through different frames.
the words that are spoken during that last scene and the shot through all of the, whatever we're calling, I guess, the jungle gym, the slow movement with the swinging and all of that. It's like the the same concept of the Matrix, only in the 50s, you know?
Yes, and agreed. we did an episode on the vampire thing with Let the Right One In, where I thought it was part of that too. So I really, if anyone didn't hear that episode of the podcast, watch that film, listen to that podcast, and then tie this in again with the visuals of the Jungle Gym from a cinematography standpoint, from a symbolism standpoint, from a use of framing of the camera. It's very
And
fun.
that was a film that you liked a lot more than I did, but I would agree with you that the symmetry is through, definitely throughout it. You know, I
And
don't
the
have to like.
patient, Eric, the patience of moving through the shot, the way that it's moved through the shot is lost, I feel
Does
like
this feel?
sometimes.
But this doesn't feel like a slow moving movie to me. Even though it
No,
does
no, it's
linger a lot on shot,
Oh,
it is so visually interesting that it never felt slow to me. I never
oh,
really.
absolutely.
I don't remember looking at my watch once. I've probably seen
I'm
it
not
6 or 7
about the
times. But
film in general. I'm talking about the last scene that you're talking about, right?
oh yes,
The
yes, yes.
slow, and there's other parts too. There's other scenes in the film where the shots are so intentional and the slow moving, the slow panning.
Erin, your thoughts on the final shot of Hero?
I think it was the best kind of happy ending that the film could have had, honestly. Having, it's hopeful. Something he might have affected that one bureaucrat who might be able to affect somebody else, who might be able to affect somebody else and have this butterfly effect of making everything better. And also, my headcanon is that bureaucrat went and had the park named after Watanabe. I've decided that's what he does after the film.
You always
'cause
have to. You are always have to have a fan fiction for every
I
for
know.
every. There's always a sequel.
Not even a very good sequel, just, in my brain, this is what I think should happen next, because that's the writer in me. Uh, but yeah, I mean, because when I was watching during the funeral and when they were all getting drunk and talking about everything and, the drunk bullshitting, and then everything goes back to normal the next day, just the whole time I was thinking, they need to name the park after him. That even if he wouldn't have cared, I think just to remember who this guy was and who he became, it would have been nice. I don't think that would have fit in the spirit of the film that much, really. I don't think that's what Kurosawa was trying to say.
Luke Higginson, your final thoughts on Ikiru?
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks again for having me on. Let me talk about this. I really do. I think it's an incredible film. We've touched on many of the reasons why, but just once again, just in terms of I think it is a fairly nuanced ultimate thesis on the meaning of life, which is sort of, to be reductive about it, a two-pronged thing of both finding something you can do to make the world a little better and help others, and also to be able to, within yourself, find little moments of joy in the world around you. And those two things I just think are sort of beautifully interwoven and really just sort of get at a very deep truth that means a lot to me. Kurosawa is the greatest to ever do it. I don't think you can really see the influence of his stuff in my work, but it's there deep down.
The top of the building scene in your film, which is meant to look like it's being shot from a video recorder, looks exactly like an Akira Kurosawa scene where you use the telephoto but make it look like a wide-angle lens so that the camera is far enough away from the performers. That's a Kurosawa trick because you've got the flatness, out of focus background, and the two characters in sharp focus, but it is spaced out. It looked like to me that looked exactly like something that I saw from something like Hidden Fortress or the dog grabbing the hand in Yojimbo. So yes, I do see a Kurosawa in Luke Higginson.
Very kind.
And by the way,
say, Eric.
well, am I wrong? But am I wrong?
It's you're right. It's in there. It's in there. Very nice of you. My film Relax, I'm from the Future, newly available on Hollywood Suite on Prime Video, if anyone has that, so you can check that out. Otherwise available to sort of rent or buy anywhere you get movies digitally. You can follow me on Instagram at Borrowed Time Media, on Blue Sky at Luke Higginson, and still, sadly, on X at Luke Cuts Video.
And Erin, what was the name of the fella that stars in that?
I believe that is one Rhys Darby.
The great Rhys Darby.
The great Rhys Darby. Oh, also, Luke, I wanted to add another influence I think that Kurosawa has on your films is the importance of giving a shit, because that was really important to relax him from the future. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you, Erin.
Luke, I just wanted to say, that film, Relax, that, it's dope.
Congratulations on getting on streaming and living another year
Thank you so much.
without dying. Your third appearance, you are now part of the Fiona Powell Hall of Fame, along with
Nice. Three-timers
eminent
club.
names. I know. I know. We'll love to have you back sometime, Luke. I'll just keep you in the loop on what we're doing. Obviously, we don't want you to become like Justin Timberlake, where you're here so often. We want to keep it special.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. Audra, I guess final thoughts on Akira.
I mean, my final thoughts are about that final scene. I see a commonality, a really interesting parallel between Kurosawa's scene where he's going through the play bars and the time that it takes to do that while the main character is swinging on a swing. Right? I find that, I don't know, I find it hilarious. I find a lot of things about this film a little campy and like, aren't you guys paying attention? Hello, humans. Hello, kind of situation. And then you go right into you're back into the funeral, and the son is speaking. You have the uncle that comes through, but the scene in which you see the frame go through the bars and he's swinging on the other side, and then you see back at the funeral that it's the same Japanese shoji screens with the same geometry that he's moving through as people are dealing with their grief, right? And then you're in between. You're in between again, right? Kurosawa does a lot of in between. We're in like this in between phase of life and death, or you're in the in between of this thought or that thought, the black and the white, which is why I love him again, because he's always talking about and showing you what's going on in the in between. And in that last scene, the uncle is asking if that was even a reality. Is that a reality? Is this a reality? And the son is saying, well, it was kind of cruel of him to not tell us that he was dying of cancer, for instance, when he's now dead, right? So everybody's worrying. It's like this song. That's
It's all about the son. It's all about how it affects him.
right, of course. And that
But
song that's come out recently where we have a catalyst that we all know in the music industry, Brandy Carlisle, who's coming in and helping these other artists that are older produce things. And one of those things was Tanya Tucker's song, Bring My Flowers Now, right? Don't wait till I'm dead to bring flowers or talk to me. Talk to me now while I'm alive. That's what matters. Because after we're
Yep.
dead, we're not here anymore. And that is like the theme through a lot of Kurosawa's films. So I love it. I'm here for it forever.
what is great is when the son is talking to his daughter-in-law, and he's found the pouch with the stamp, the bank book, and he
Yes.
had left,
Yes.
and it dawns on him that he knew that was going to be Watanabe knew that was going to be his last night on Earth
Yeah.
when he left the house that night. And that's the first time we find that out too, and it's remarkably done. Jennifer, your final thoughts on watching Ikiru?
Uh, yes, and to what Audra said about bring the flowers now and say it. I think they're the the framing through the jungle gym, yes, magic. And then there's also, while that's happening, you flash back through all of the funeral scene to sort of what we've talked about through this, the symbolism of Watanabe. He's now in the frame of the picture above them all, watching them. So when people are expressing different things and talking, I mean, it's typical at a funeral to do that, but the way it was framed in this, again, with those rule of thirds, even way that the picture is draped, he's watching, and he's watching these changes and these revelations in these other people, and the mixed view of that, that both Luke and Aaron said, of the best ending that it could be, the best sort of some advancement. Some people are going to grow and it'll be temporary, while the liquor wears off, or the day of the funeral and the memory fades quickly of the loss, and then other people will be impacted and make changes going forward. that are more impactful, right? More permanent steps towards changes and your six pack abs. There, Eric. What
That
you're
I'm never
laughing at?
going to get.
Oh, right. But you might want, but you will do other things,
But
and
not enough, not enough to actually go get to do what you need to go
Come
get them.
on, why not?
well, I mean, because the choices of
Because
things that,
carbs
yeah,
are awesome and exercise sucks.
and time is a limited resource. This came up yesterday at this
Oh,
event. Why is that?
speaking of
Go.
time, Jen, the scene. Okay, so in that last funeral scene, I keep forgetting to mention this. There's a shot where he very specifically has a close up of a stuffed white rabbit with a giant time clock with
Yeah,
Asian characters behind it.
yeah.
And
I
that
was just
is
going to
a,
talk about that.
oh,
Go ahead.
funny. Like, that's a
Go.
total cultural reference to time. Who's got the time? Like the White Rabbit, Alice in Wonderland.
Well,
I mean,
well,
that's
Yes.
but that's
brilliant,
that's
right?
the wind up. That's one Toyo's wind up rabbit, the one that she makes for the
Yeah.
children in the factory.
Exactly.
That apparently goes to lots of homes, and lots of, like, her dream is to be in every child's home, and I was like, there's a nice message of, could we pass along a message to the future and different people to have different perspectives. I liked that as well.
Yeah,
What is the message?
if you're listening to the show and you work in an investment bank, quit your job and go make toys.
Like, what
Oh,
is the message? Is the message we're to me the message is like I'm making these and I'm not totally conscious of how this is going to have butterfly effects over other children. It's going to make them also what? Follow the white rabbit? We never have enough time. Uh-oh, what kind of butterfly effects are we sending out to humanity? But it brings this
But
person joy to make them.
do you find it interesting? It cuts to the rabbit right after the uncle is asking why the girlfriend isn't there.
Mhm.
hmm.
Which because is that the original rabbit that he grabbed, or did she bring that and leave it at his shrine?
I don't
Right.
know.
Ah, yeah, beautiful, isn't it? Go
Does it
ahead. Sorry.
matter? Well, no, I'm curious, Eric. Does it matter if it's
No,
one?
no, it does. No, it does. No, it doesn't. Either
The question
interpretation
is
works,
what
and that's
matter,
what I.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I
well,
like
but
about
I'm
it.
curious, like, about the question. Like, does it matter what kind of person and where they're at in their life in the moment would think that it is made by that person? Did she bring it there? Was it the original? What kind of thought process is that person going through that thinks that it's the original versus a different one? Right?
Mm.
I know that
That's
may
a
be
very
like
interesting.
overthinking, but it's
Why
interesting,
don't we
right?
take a poll in the comments, and if you think it's the original, and tell us something about yourself,
Oh, go
and
ahead.
if you think she brought it, tell us something about yourself.
Yeah. The other cool shot is, or visuals, is going back to the office and different angles of people being buried alive or dipping, drowning behind the piles of paper, which I thought was cool. There's several shots of that. And then it goes from that, like, to the park and somebody looking down and the kids enjoying the park. I thought that was fun.
Again, Watanabe has shown them how to get six-pack abs, and they're like, "Yeah, that would be great, but donut."
Oh, donuts are the best. You know why? Because they're my favorite shape, the torus. The torus is the key to all matter and humanity. Oh, I was
But
just gonna say that last scene that I was talking about with the rabbit, and I don't mean to overstep here, but it was like a very important line that was said on that particular shot, which I think is really interesting, and I forgot about until I was rehashing what was going on, and I have it literally in front of me. And when they're on that shot, the line is very specific and it says I'll do my best, and it goes right back into the funeral seance type place that they're at with the shrine. It says I swear it, we must carry on his work, right? So that shot of the white rabbit chasing time and always being late and then going back into we must carry on his work, what a cool butterfly effect that people actually care now that he's dead. And the whole point is care now while people are alive. Okay, I'm done.
and we do see that one bureaucrat at the end.
When they pick up the
Nope.
hat and he talks about the pouch, there's again
Yeah,
framing
cool
through the
cool things are
screens.
best.
through the Soji screens or whatever that look similar to the Jungle Gym. And again, rule of thirds, square framing. It's very cool for people to look at it. So when the sun picks up the hat, take note of those shots. They're very cool.
It kind of reminded me of some M.C. Escher um,
Yeah.
Totally. That's
woodcut and stuff.
exactly what I thought. And then he says, we'll sacrifice ourselves for the betterment of you after he's dead. Like, so we're going to do our best now after you're gone? Oh, it just bothers me so much.
Well, Christ had to die for our sins.
I mean, but is
It's just
that the
human
story
nature.
that needs to is that the
It's
story
human
that needs to
nature.
permeate our consciousness though? Like what if the consciousness thought that we permeated is hello, be in the present moment with me now.
Why can't I have flowers now instead of at my funeral?
Exactly.
Erin Brown, your final thoughts on Ikiru?
This is the first Kurosawa film that I watched the whole thing, as I said before, and I'm glad that I saw this one. And I really want to watch more of them because I mean it was sad, but it had that hopeful ending, and I mean the importance of doing something with your life. Don't just exist; you got to live. You know, it's. I think it was a beautiful film, and I'm really glad that we did this one.
Audra, Angelique, where can people find you on the internet?
Global Creatives with an S, globalcreatives.org and audraangelique.com.
Jennifer Trio, where can we find you and the Gilbert Baker Film Festival on the internets?
Gilbert Baker Film Festival .lgbt, and on Instagram, Gilbert Baker Film Fest. You'll find a link tree, or on other things, you'll find a link tree. You'll find all the socials there, and I'm on all the socials as well. You'll find me linked through the film festival there. Oh, and
And
I'm gonna put out there, come talk in the comments. Come talk to us.
we're
Dialogue about
so
the film.
we're so lonely on YouTube. Erin, where can people find you on the internet? And I heard a rumor you're hosting next week. What film are you bringing us?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Toad Puppy and on YouTube at Pizza Horse Productions. And next week we're going to do one of my favorite films by my very favorite director, Jojo Rabbit, Taika Waititi's 2019 Oscar-winning film. Well, he got an Oscar for Best Screenplay, and was that in Screenplay? Doesn't matter. He's an Oscar winner, which is cool, and it's a great film, and I'm really looking forward to it.
And where can they find us on the internet, Erin?
And you can find the podcast at ko-fi.com/world cinema history. We've got all the back catalog up. Any episode you want to listen to, it's there, and places for you to discuss the films. We encourage that. And yeah, go there and maybe drop us a tip so that we can keep the podcast advertising free.
All right. You can always catch me at ETROMMATER on the artist formerly known as Twitter. As mentioned, next week we're doing Jojo Rabbit. After that, we are going to do a 4-part series on aging in film by the Masters. This was the first. We're also going to be covering Ingmar Bergman's Wild Strawberries, Vittoria De Sica's Umberto D, and we are going to end the month with, I think, the greatest film ever made in Japan and one of the great films in the history of cinema and the greatest film on aging and mortality, Yasuhiro Ozu's Tokyo Story. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next week for Jojo Rabbit.